Welcome to Hence the Future podcast. I'm Mattimore Cronin.
And I'm Justin Clark.
And today we're discussing the future of smart homes. So first, before we get started with all the different future scenarios, I would like to just talk about what we would ideally want in a home, assuming all technology is possible, because it's quite likely a lot of what we can imagine right now and would want will be possible by the year 2050, or at least, say 2100. So assuming all things are possible, what is the ideal home? What does the ideal home look like to Justin Clark?
Oh man, so I guess we just start out from
Yeah, you can go room by
first thing in the
room, or
morning.
you can any general trends, however you want to begin.
Yeah, so I kind of go back and forth between a couple of different types of homes. One is kind of this apartment slash condo in a giant mega city, right? A city that's beyond anything we can conceive of right now because, it's just insanely dense
Hmm.
population. But so that's one aspect that I'll touch on. But then the other one is I kind of just want to live in the woods somewhere, but
Right.
be augmented by all of these technologies that are coming and have a smart home, kind of like if you've seen Ex Machina,
Hmm.
the guy that's just kind of living in a remote wilderness but a super futuristic home.
Yeah, that is very cool.
um, but anyways, so I'll just start first thing in the morning, get out of bed and go to the kitchen. That's like the first thing I want to do, and make my tea. So in the
Mm.
kitchen, I just kind of want, this is super easy. I think it's the technology is there right now, but I just want something that'll have my tea waiting for me. And this
Hmm.
is, I'm not talking tea bags. I'm kind of a tea snob, so it's
Right.
like,
Well, they do have, which is also in my ideal home scenario, they
mhm,
do have robot arm chefs, and I think I'm going
yeah.
to share this on our social media feed. But basically, they have this chef robot that trains based on real chefs actually putting on these haptic gloves and making whatever recipe that they're programming into the chef
Mm,
bot. So you have basically the ghost of one of these great chefs preparing a meal for you, and you can just choose from a variety of meals. So that would certainly be in my ideal future kitchen.
oh yeah. So is this the Moly or do you know the name of this
I
robot
forget the name of
kitchen?
it. I saw it on CNET. They did this big thing
Okay.
about it, but
Because I saw something called Moly. I think that's how you say it. I don't know if that's really the right pronunciation.
huh.
I don't know what I think about it. But anyways, Moley.
Okay.
This is basically a robotic, like kind of like you were saying, just a robotic kitchen. So it's this
Hmm.
big pod that would almost take up a wall of your kitchen, but it kind of closes off as you select on your little touch screen what food you want it to make for you.
Hmm.
And it has these robotic arms. I'm pretty sure we're thinking about the same
Yeah, I
thing.
think you're
Um,
right. I mean, the
but
other thing
it's
that people say is definitely going to integrate is in these smart kitchens is you'll just have Amazon Fresh or
mhm,
whatever food delivery service you have delivering it directly to
yeah.
your fridge, and your fridge will actually, I mean, they already have this component where your fridge measures how much milk do you have left, how many eggs do you have,
Hmm.
and it can just sort of all automate in that regard. But
Yep.
that also poses some security risks because if you're letting people into your home or even just letting droids into your home, your home could be hacked. You could get,
Hmm.
your password could get stolen, and people work
Right.
from their homes a lot, so you could have all of your valuable intellectual property also accessible to thieves. So I think the biggest component for me about the future of homes is that it's secure and you feel safe. Because when you think
Yep.
about what a home fundamentally is, it's the place where you go to get away from the dangers of the world and to sort of lick your
Yep.
wounds and be with your loved ones without having to worry about it. I mean, whether you're a caveman or a man living in the year 2100. So one big theme with my future ideal home is security and privacy. And I actually think that you would want to have some sort of complete cell phone, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, all radiation blocking all the way around. And
Yeah.
I was thinking it would be even a really super cool startup if you did this with like a wallpaper that has that sort of
Like
blocking
the
material
EMF
in it.
filter thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because I
And
use
that's,
that on my laptop so that I don't get any radiation on my lap.
yeah. So I think there are actually some really thin materials. The problem right now is they're so expensive to
Right.
make this EMF filter. So would you have Wi-Fi in the home, or you'd
So,
go home and you have
right.
paper books and
No, so
or
this so
wired
this is the
connections
way that
though?
I'm conceiving the ideal home. Most
Mhm.
of the house or part of the house has absolutely no technology. Like my bedroom, I don't want a single thing there that has any technology. I want my bedroom to basically be a Faraday cage.
Mhm.
And then for the kitchen, I want some smart things. I want the robot arm. For the
Yeah.
laundry room, I want the robot arm. But for the living room and the bedroom, I want absolutely no technology. But then in the den or the office, I want to have a full VR rig that is hooked up in such a way that it's basically indistinguishable from reality. So your office can be basic like having near real meetings with anyone who you would need to across the world, preferably with feedback, even through motion.
Mhm.
And then in the playroom, I would have underneath in sort of like the level you take an elevator down, I would have this giant sort of VR park. So you could actually just like run around for like, let's say 1 square mile. So basically it's like infinite as
Mm.
far as you're concerned, but all the software programs you'd load onto it would be designed in such a way that you would never go like further than that. And you could have, I mean, the possibilities are almost infinite if you do that. And if you can have like the sort of like the a terraforming ground that can sort of create different sorts of physical objects whenever you want, or if you wanted to interact with like real people, like you could even have like some bots down there. And it
That's
could obviously
awesome.
get very dystopic like really really quick.
Yeah, you don't have
But
any interaction with any living creatures. It's just
right, right.
robots, the whole thing. So is this something that you want in a city? Because there are like very obvious advantages to being in a huge city if you're wanting this super futuristic sort of scenario with the home delivery drones and all that stuff. Because when you were talking about, you know, security with the Amazon Fresh
Hmm.
delivered straight to your refrigerator, if you were living in a huge condo or apartment building with almost little drone slots that go into the back of your fridge, like
Hmm.
just
Right,
facing the
right.
outside wall. No one even needs to go through your door. They just
Yeah,
kind of
that's a
go
good
to
point.
these little doorways on the back of your kitchen or your fridge. That might be one potential solution, but obviously the whole city needs to be designed around that. Um,
Right, right.
so I
I
don't know
mean, the
what you're
way I was
thinking.
envisioning it is also kind of like Ex Machina, where
Hmm.
he's got a whole island that,
Yeah.
you can have drones and helicopters get sent there. I think I'd give up the 1 hour delivery for having my own island, but obviously, I mean, there's going to be so many more people around by that point that
Yeah.
it's certainly could be interpreted as a pipe dream to think you would have that much free space to yourself. So I think when we're talking about just the future of smart homes in general, it's important to think about what the average home will be like.
Mhm.
So, I mean, this gets a little bit into sort of how I think the best and worst case scenarios are because just like how today some people live in incredible homes and some people live in squalor, it's going to have the same sort of dichotomies in the future. So
Mhm.
I don't know if we want to. I mean, I guess it's a little bit early to get into the scenarios, but I
I
think
mean,
it's
we're
a good
kind
way
of
of
touching on
framing
our
it.
own
So
best cases.
yeah, yeah. So let's get into it. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll get into the best case, worst case, most likely future scenarios. All right. So let's get into first the worst case scenario. So what's the worst case scenario for the future of smart homes?
Worst case scenario.
Yeah, so I think the worst case scenario is very tied to poorness and the lack of money to afford any of these technologies. Because we know that technology is advancing like crazy. Some people are going to have these awesome homes that we're talking about, but then, like you're saying, some people will just be living in squalor. Like I think the worst case is having this income inequality so high that only a few people can, afford really futuristic homes, or at least the homes they want. Because
Right.
that's the other thing is we don't want to force people to live a certain way. We want people to live in a way that suits them the best. And there's some consideration with the environment because if we encourage sprawl too much in cities and
Hmm.
homes, then that's bad for the environment. So there's a lot of considerations. um, but yeah, I think the worst case is we have way too many people living in basically futuristic slums, kind of like the
Hmm.
stacks in Ready Player One.
Yeah. Or like
So that,
Elysium.
yeah, and then the only getaway is this VR world. Like that's their
Hmm.
home. Like it's just a terrible home otherwise, just basically a trailer, but they just escape everything because, it's not fun to live where they live.
Yeah. So I think that's good, and that's part of my worst case scenario also. Although I have like a slightly more sinister spin on it, which is more
Okay.
1984, which is
Mm,
or in like this one Black Mirror episode where you have basic conveniences. So let's assume there's universal basic income in the future. Most people at least have the bare essentials, and the bare essentials, by our standards today, are pretty good because they have so much more technology. So, but what goes along with that, if you are someone who's an average person in society, not like in the upper echelon, then you would have your data harvested, your every move being watched and analyzed and used to market to you. And like in that one Black Mirror episode, 500,000 miles or something like that, where basically there's screens everywhere, everyone's consuming media and ads, and then they go to work and they ride these bikes to generate
mm.
electricity, which then is used to power the screens, which they then consume and
Yeah.
watch ads, and it becomes this cycle of just consumerism. So I think that's one way that it could go pretty badly.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that too is that that seems relatively likely with a universal basic income, which is funny because having this universal basic income has been a best case scenario for us in the past. So, we have to make sure that we do the UBI right and we don't encourage this sort of exploitation of users and their data and
Right.
their minds.
There's obviously hackers and
Mm,
advertisers. We've talked about both of those. The other part is the government. So, as long as the government is pretty good, then it's kind of okay for them to look through back doors. If they're really just using it to find terrorists and other people
mhm.
that basically everyone agrees need to be taken down, then it's pretty acceptable. But if we get into a scenario where the government does have backdoors, like let's say the Apples of the world sort of lose out in their argument and they give backdoors to the government, like a lot of other companies already have. Like Intel has, like, Microsoft and other companies have. Um, and then if the government becomes less than good, and if they start going after people who are just critics of the government, like they already do in China and Russia and other places, then
Mhm.
it could be very much like a 1984 scenario where the TV is watching you. Not only are you watching the
Yeah.
TV, it's watching you and it can see everything. And with the Facebook portal and all of the Alexa and the Google actual visuals that have a camera, but especially the portal, because that one follows you around. It follows you around while you're in while you're in the room walking. So
And
we're
it's just
already there.
particularly scary because it's Facebook. Like they've
Yeah,
been
they have a
notoriously
terrible
bad
track
with data.
record. Right.
But what do you think about you mentioned earlier all of the like the Faraday cage. What do you
Hmm.
think would be the worst case scenario in regard to that? Like, having 5G all over the place and it turns out that 5G or its
Yeah.
predecessor or its successors are, extremely toxic to our bodies and cause
Right.
cancers at unseen levels. That's another terrible scenario for me.
Yeah, I think it's quite likely we're going to find out that all of that radiation and stuff going through your body is not good and it causes more mutations and it's correlated with cancer. And
Hmm.
so I
And other
think
things we don't even know about.
that's why I think it's crucial that at the very least, for the 10 hours a day that you're in your bedroom, at least have that be radiation free. You can go without your cell phone during that time or anything else. Or if you need to use it, just put it in airplane mode or
Yeah,
whatever we have by that point instead of cell phones.
yeah, yeah. And I know a lot of people, in the biohacker community, they do have basically Faraday cages in your bedroom, like you described.
Hmm. I mean,
And
like, let's also say that if we totally screw up the environment, which is also a worst case scenario,
mhm,
then I could see a situation where you're in your sort of Faraday cage, like, but it's also protected from the outside air and it has air filtration built in. And then you go down into your garage, sort of like Boring Company, you get lowered down and you get into
mm,
your self-driving, pod,
yep.
and you never really need to go outside. You go to like indoor gyms and it's basically like almost like Mars outside.
Oh man, that sounds truly terrifying, honestly, but
Yeah.
not that unlikely in the far future.
Right,
Because
right.
there's been a lot of, there's a lot of pessimism around what we can actually do to change these huge climate effects. Like we're well beyond the point of this being an easy change
Hmm.
for humanity, to make the environment cleaner for everybody. So
Yeah.
yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into now the best case scenario.
Best case scenario.
So I'm gonna do the flip side since we were just talking about sleep. I'll do the flip side of that.
Okay.
So there's a lot of things that factor into good sleep, and there's a lot of cool research going out about this. So one of the things that I forgot where this study was done, but I believe Matthew Walker talked about it. He's the Berkeley professor, neuroscientist that talks about sleep, or he researches sleep. Um, but they were doing these studies on white noise, but it's white noise that oscillates in volume,
Hmm.
almost to the same sort of frequency as your um, delta deep sleep waves.
Hmm.
So it's like this white noise is oscillating in the background, but it's syncing up with your deep sleep cycle. So you can kind of get this, or you can get this really deep sleep because of this sound that's playing in the background.
Interesting.
Or yeah, and there's maybe some other things that you can do, but you can easily have these little devices or these things in your room that prepare you to have the best sleep possible. Another one is smart lights. So a lot of research has come out recently about how this artificial light that everybody has in their house is affecting our sleep pattern. So this could be screens, this could just be regular lights. Because if you think about the natural world, the sun is insanely bright, way brighter than any indoor fluorescent office that you could possibly imagine, which is why there's kind of this push to have natural light in your home. But the flip side of that is it also gets really dark at night, but people want to turn on their lights so they can see perfectly at night. Whereas in nature, this actually wouldn't happen. You would have dim lights. It would be more on the red spectrum rather than the blue spectrum of lights.
Hmm.
And you can have these smart lights throughout your house, and this is already a thing that kind of tint towards the red spectrum and then get really deep red, sort of like the sunset. And your home can kind of mimic the natural circadian rhythm of the day.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that kind of fits in nicely with my best case scenario, which would have the same sort of specific alterations to match up with you and what your mood is and whatever you want at any given time. And so in my best case scenario, in the bedroom, like I said, there'd be absolutely no tech, and there would also be a big off switch where so you could turn off the AI house, and there would be nothing that would be able to like open or close the door. So just from pure safety precautions, that's what my safety and bedroom
Hmm.
situation would be. But in the rest of the house, I would have it alternate as with every move that I make. So imagine like you put your dirty laundry on the or your dirty laundry on the floor, and within minutes it's perfectly clean and hanging up exactly where it needs to be. Or you come downstairs and with just a few taps you put what you want as a meal, and then you go sit down on the couch and it gets served to you right there. And
Hmm.
it'll sort of, the lighting will change to be optimized for whatever your mood is or whatever it is that you're doing during the day, the heat, the temperature, whatever natural lighting, whatever like screens could create the perfect ambiance. So everything would just seamlessly, basically the technology would be so good that it would disappear.
Yeah.
And you would still have your bedroom as the refuge and as your sort of control center and zen place. But for just like optimizing your experience through technology, the rest of the house would have perfect synchronization with what you want and what you're doing.
Yeah. So this I'm conflicted about having a fully autonomous house. I mean, there's definitely a few things that I want to be autonomous. Like for one, I hate doing laundry and I hate folding laundry, and I think
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think both of us are in that boat. So
And
there are
dishes
these.
too.
Have you heard of the Laundroid? It's
No.
this laundry folding robot. So basically, you just throw your entire pile of clean clothes on into this robot, and it'll learn it learns how to fold and separate into the correct person's pile. So if you have a four-person family, it'll say, okay, this is mom, this is dad, this is
Huh.
son, this is daughter, and it'll fold up all of their clothes and put it into the right bin or in the right little cubby in the bottom of this robot. But yeah, it's called the Laundroid.
Huh.
Seems pretty cool. It's a measly $16,000,
Oh, wow.
so it's really affordable. But no, for real, this would be one of those things that I think is not a big deal right now, but it will be.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's one of those things that people spend a lot of time on, especially with if you have a bunch of kids that are getting dirty all the time and you're seemingly doing laundry every single day. That's a lot of time that's spent on folding
Yeah,
clothes. Like
yeah.
several hours per week is spent on laundry. And if you can change this and, have some sort of autonomy there, that's good. The one thing that I don't know about is if I would even want a fully autonomous kitchen. So I personally enjoy kind of this zen slow moving dinner
Hmm.
rather than just having it in front of me and scarfing it down. Like I like to make food an experience. So
Yeah.
I mean my family have been cookers. They've been really good at cooking basically my whole life. So that's kind of just how I've grown up.
Hmm.
Um,
I would much rather have a robot just make it for me.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice sometimes because there are just times when I don't want to, and right now the solution is let's just go out to eat.
Right, right.
So
But that's fun too. I mean, I would still go out
yeah,
to eat, but I mean, I don't mind cooking, but it's just not where I get my jingles.
yeah, I mean, I think it would be pretty easy to adapt to not cooking. Like there's obvious benefit. Like you could just spend that time meditating, just
Right.
straight meditating while it's
Yeah,
cooking.
or reading or
Yeah.
working or watching something or
Yeah, so
yeah.
if you wanted a Zen practice, it doesn't have to be eating. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm flexible on that point.
I mean, obviously, it's like, everyone's ideal home is going to be different. So I guess like the best case scenario you could say would be everyone gets their ideal home,
Mhm.
controlling for things like screwing up the environment with having an overly big, oversized carbon footprint
Yeah.
or anything like that. So,
There are a couple things though that I think should, in my opinion, be essential components to any home, like no matter what your tastes are. And these are the hidden things when it comes to the home. So one of the things that I really think should be in everybody's home is sensors everywhere that detect things like um, mold. So there's been a lot of research about how toxic mold actually is, like mycotoxins. Um, I know Dave Asprey has, been sort of controversial sometimes, but he has a lot of really good things. And this is the bulletproof guy, the
hmm
the guy who founded Bulletproof, but he kind of, at least he was the first person I heard talk about how damaging molds are and how they can create these autoimmune conditions in kids. So that might one of the reasons we might have seen such an insane jump in asthma and autism is potentially because we have extremely well insulated homes that don't allow for any airflow.
right, right.
That could be one of the factors. There's a lot of potential factors there. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but there's a lot of other toxins that we don't even think about as toxins. So like
hmm
pollen count, being able to control and clean the air, but you don't want to clean the air too much. Like you don't want to have too high of oxygen, and it also depends on what the external environment is. So if you're living in a big city, you have a lot of pollutants from just cars and
Right,
the
right.
sheer number of people.
Well, that's why I think, I mean, one of the greatest cleansers of any environment are plants and trees.
Yeah.
And so, like, for instance, my house here, which I'm very fortunate to be renting, is, it has trees surrounding the whole house, and then it has one big tree as sort of an umbrella over the top.
Mm,
And we have our own oxygen supply. And fortunately, fortunately, the air around us is still pretty good. It's not like we're living in,
yeah.
Shanghai.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think whether you're indoors in a big city or whether you're outdoors, I think having lots of foliage around you is just one of the safest, most tried and true ways to get some good
Mhm.
airflow.
Yeah. And that could just be one thing as research comes out. Everyone has different tastes when it comes to plants, but it doesn't even need to be a plant if that's not your taste. I mean, it's personally my taste too,
hmm
like just having that natural cleaning mechanism. But there's also a whole bunch of new air filters that are supposedly efficient. I think Molecule is one of
Oh
them.
yeah, yeah, I've seen that.
I see advertisements
Dyson
about
has
them.
one too.
Okay. Yeah, and I just think having clean air to breathe, like that's one
Yeah.
of the most fundamental
But those
things
don't
that
actually
humans.
produce oxygen. Plants produce oxygen, which is
Right.
nice.
They clean out the particulates and
hmm
stuff. But so like dust
But yeah,
hanging
having a
around in the air.
combination of that where, let's say, you're filtering air from outside into the house, so you're getting
Yeah.
clean, fresh air circulating, and then you also have some plants inside your house, so you have some nice, fresh oxygen inside, and maybe some plants also outside your house.
Mhm.
That would be a great solution.
Oh yeah. And so there's a lot of things that you can do to mitigate. It depends on where you live too. So
hmm
in California, a lot of it is really dry, and you wouldn't think that there's a lot of mold in homes. And I don't think there is a lot of mold in the homes in California. But if you're talking somewhere like the Pacific Northwest, where it's just kind of
Yeah,
wet all the time, you have to really worry about some of these molds
right.
um, breaking into your house. And one of the things I've seen is you can use bacteria to fight the molds.
Hmm.
One thing that I learned recently is mold and fungi are kind of like sworn enemies. So if
That's
one of
so
them,
funny.
yeah, and one of the things that is interesting too is you can use them to fight like if you have fungi that is damaging in your home and you have a non-damaging bacteria that can fight the fungi, like you would prefer that
Right,
bacteria to the
right.
fungi. But then maybe sometimes you prefer fungi to bacteria. So then you can kind of go
Huh.
back and forth and use this natural mechanism to help clean your home and everything else.
Wow.
Um, and one of
So
the
what would you
cool
do?
things,
Like, let's say you have a rotting wall that just had, they put some fresh paint over it to make it seem fresh, but you can smell and it looks damp. What would you do with the fungi? Would you just like inject some spores like into the wall, or how would you actually do
well,
it?
so the fungi is the mold. And then the bacteria is the thing that breaks it, like doesn't allow this mold to perpetuate basically. So the spores aren't able to um, reproduce, or they're not allowed.
So how would
So
you, so what would you put in there to
it's
fix
just
it?
like a bacterial spray basically.
Oh,
I mean, if it's too far gone, then you just get rid of the wall.
right,
Um,
right.
but but yeah, if you have one of the problems is like vents, and if you have a lot of moisture built up in vents, those are hard to get to. But if you can somehow circulate this bacterial spray to get rid of the um, fungi, it's basically a probiotic for your home.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of really interesting things that you can do with fungi and not bacteria. So one of the things that's really cool about fungi is they're a natural chemist. And I saw this video about how some people are using fungi to develop personalized medicine, which would be really interesting to have in your
Whoa.
home. Like almost a home-based doctor for your super basic needs. And this would be something along the lines. So if you needed a headache medicine of some sort,
Mm-hmm.
you could potentially have a a pharmacist, whether this is like a natural pharmacist, like a fungi, some sort of fungus that excretes something that that kills the bacteria or virus that you have in your body, or if this was just some sort of tried and true chemical reaction, something that can mix these different compounds together and make a drug personal to you based on your genome and your blood work and everything. That would be really interesting to have.
Yeah.
And you don't need to go to the pharmacy. You just kind of have it built
Right.
right in front of
Right, to
you.
have all the chemical compounds right there, and then it just gets assembled for you based
Hmm.
on the diagnostics that are available to you right there. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, we talked earlier about how the home is really a place where you can go and lick your wounds and be safe. So I think having an AI doctor in there as well and some real high quality first aid, better than
Yeah.
anything we have today, that would be a great best case scenario.
Hmm.
So unless you have anything else, I think it'd be good to get into the most likely scenario.
There's one other area that I want to talk about, and that's the personal assistants. So,
Ah, yeah.
so in the far future, if you've ever seen Iron Man and Jarvis, the AI that basically helps him along and
Mm-hmm.
talks to him and does anything basically that he needs to do, he'll do it. And
Yeah.
you can just have him respond to emails for you. You can have him do basically anything
Right. Sort
that's
of like in
digital.
Her also.
Oh yeah, her. That's a good one. That's a really interesting movie. I just watched it for the first time about a month ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, having that or the AI that you can kind of confide in, that's almost like
Yeah.
having a psychiatrist in your
Like she
home.
searched through all of the writing that he has ever done and distilled it into just the very best pieces in the order that makes the most sense, and there it is. And like I can't tell you how many people I know who have been wanting to write a book or an autobiography, but the thought of just going through all of their old journals
Hmm.
and doing all that grunt work to put something together, that's the hardest part. But if
Yeah.
you had an AI assistant that could just do everything that everything better than you can do, except for whatever it is that's your special flavor of
Yeah.
humanness.
Yeah, I mean that would just be amazing. I mean, you don't even need it to be for work. I mean, it would be awesome if you know the economy turns into this remote economy. Most people work from home, and you know it can
Right.
help you with your work tasks and make you
Well, I
insanely
mean,
more
whether you're getting
productive.
paid for it or not, I feel like everything is all sort of about truth and beauty. So it's like, and whether you're pursuing it for its own sake versus pursuing it for because another company is paying you. But like,
Hmm.
if you're pursuing truth, like philosophy or furthering knowledge or anything like that, you could definitely use an AI assistant. And if you're furthering beauty, like if you're composing new works or if you're writing some new poetry or painting something, that also could be well assisted by AI. So I think
Hmm.
whatever you're doing, it could be helpful, but I think there will
Yeah.
also always be this sort of hipster, traditional, no tech
Yep.
subculture. So I don't think that's going away either.
Yeah. I mean, that'll be a culture. That'll be like two different cultures within my own home. Like the no
Right.
tech areas, like you were saying, the bedroom, and the
Yeah.
high tech areas. You know, this it's really interesting
Yeah.
to, it's going to be interesting to see how people, especially the very wealthy, design their homes. Like Bill Gates, for example,
Uh-huh.
his extends to the art that each person in the family likes to see when they walk into specific rooms.
Right, right. Well, it's kind of like
So,
now when you look at your phone and unlock it, you go into this digital world versus if you throw your phone on the sofa and then you just sort of like lay down and read a book, like that's another very different world. So imagine if you're in your bedroom in the world that we know today, where you're just reclined reading like normal ape stuff, and
mhm.
then you walk into your office and it's like diving inside your phone. Like you're in the digital realm.
Mm,
You can
yeah,
be physically anywhere you imagine to be through some brain machine interface. You can
mhm,
interface with any person, like just pull knowledge and like sort of like
yeah.
Minority Report, like organizing any of your thoughts. Um, I think that's going to be become even a more pronounced dichotomy of human existence is the digital realm and then the monkey realm.
Yeah. So, what do you think is not going to be covered by the home or shouldn't be covered by the home? Like, is there any reason people should leave the home? The one that comes to my mind is like nature, like getting out in
Yes.
nature and doing
Nature
something.
and real old fashioned human to human connection are the
Yeah.
two main reasons to leave the home. Because
Yeah.
it's also super important that you travel and meet other people who live far away, not that you just travel through virtual reality, because that leads to greater understanding and greater collaboration. So there
Mm-hmm.
should still be physical travel. It should just be that while you're in your home, you can be as productive and comfortable as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
All right, so let's get into now the most likely scenario for the future of smart homes.
Most likely scenario.
So, what do you
Okay.
feel is the most likely outcome? Let's say in the year 2050 or 2100, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So, of course, this varies based on the income level, but I think like I said, technology is going to continue to advance, barring some giant catastrophe that wipes out, you know, a lot of the population. But if people have this technology available to them, I think they will take advantage of it. But what I think is probably likely is there's going to be data leakage, and big companies are going to have access to all of your home data, all of the activities that take place in your home, which is kind of scary.
Hmm.
Um, but in a way, it's also really good to, especially like if Amazon knows that you're down on something, like you don't even think that you're running low on something, but you
Right.
use it all the time. Like it's kind of good to just have that sort of fail safe
You can
in place.
offload a lot of cognitive work.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the one of the downsides to offloading a lot of the work is I'm confident in my own abilities to, stay busy, keep learning, keep growing, but I worry that a lot of the population will not be equipped to handle all of the free time that is afforded to them
Right,
by
right.
some of these new technologies. So does that mean they just go into their Netflix or their VR or whatever, they want to do to
Yeah.
escape and just pass the time? So I'm not entirely sure
I think you could
where
incentivize
this
it
is
a little
going.
bit. Like if you, let's say there's UBI,
Hmm.
and if you maintain this certain level of healthiness based on these metrics, then you get a greater number of income versus
Hmm.
people who underperform in those areas. So it's,
Hmm.
I mean, that can still be dystopic. Like in 1984, they have them get up every morning and do the jumping jacks and stuff like that, and they're pretty much forced to do it.
Yeah.
But I still think it, I mean, I think there are ways that we can encourage people to be healthy, but
Hmm.
we also want to leave them as much freedom as possible.
Right. Yeah, and it's just like I said, it's just a little worrisome to think how people might use all the extra free time if they're not working.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, it's not that worrisome from the sense of like security of the country, I don't think. I mean, I think it would be probably still way better than where we are now, but I think we
It's just a
need something.
shame. It's just wasted
Yeah,
opportunities.
yeah. So, if we have these technologies in the home that can make people have more time for, human to human interaction and building their
Uh-huh.
relationships and learning, if we have these homes that are better for humans, in the sense that it helps them grow, like if the house itself is basically just an assistant to humans, and that also includes like coaching. Like it'll be like, hey, we notice you've been on the couch a lot recently. You've just been kind of sedentary recently.
Hmm.
Maybe we have these apps that people use kind of in a self-help manner that are connected to the home. It's like home apps instead of phone apps.
Right, right. I mean, they
Yeah.
already have that new mirror that is supposed to be your fitness coach, and it can
Mm.
measure your whole body mass index and fat percentage and all of that kind of stuff. And it also will give you whatever routine, like yoga and whatever else. I mean, it kind of freaks me out just because, again, it's like a mirror looking back at you is like a little freaky to me. And I think all of these coaches and everything, they're great so long as they're optional, like people can have them.
Mm.
I think a lot of it depends on like how benevolent the government remains going
Yeah.
into the more far future. Because I mean, if you look in history, it's not that common to have a benevolent government, and we're
Right.
even with all the problems we have today, it still is more good than not. But if that were to change, then it can get real bad real fast. So with my most likely scenario, it is great for some people. Some people's homes are like the Bat Cave, super private, super secure. There's
Hmm.
nature. You've got everything you need. You got the equivalent of Jeeves, or your is that
Jarvis.
or
Yeah.
Jarvis, like over there. Um, but then for other people, it's more like 1984. It's like you've got your government issued TV in your cubic smart home, and you're getting analyzed. You don't have the option to, or you could turn the ads off, but you don't have the money to pay for the services otherwise.
Hmm.
And it's there are definitely different degrees of how bad that could be. It could just be like advertising like we know today, which is annoying, but it's not like that crazy
Yeah.
deceptive as it could be.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
once we understand more about the human mind, like that's when it starts to get scary to know how companies are going to use that for marketing. But
yeah,
I think
yeah.
we just there's enough that we don't know about the mind that makes it to where we're not as susceptible to manipulation.
Right,
Although I
like
think
there
we
there
are
are some
still pretty
lines that should never
susceptible.
be crossed. Like for instance, what if you had some future company that paid people to bump into you or have seemingly random encounters, and then tell you about like one specific thing to try to get you on it. Like they keep
Oh,
like people
wow.
keep coming up to me and talking about Pilates and like how I really need to try Pilates and it's helped them and oh, this really beautiful woman came up and asked me about if I was going to Pilates later, and it's like I better go to get a Pilates membership. And then it
Oh
turns
my
out that
gosh.
like not only are they orchestrating what goes on in the digital realm, but if it goes into the real world realm, that's why I think, I mean, that's the biggest worry with some of the stuff that's been going on with the Russia hacks and everything else, is that the digital world is starting to creep into the real world. Like it's starting to
Hmm.
affect elections. And
Yeah.
so that's what we certainly need to work to prevent.
Yeah. I've actually never really thought of that sort of advertising scenario where you just have paid actors, bumping into you and planting all these seeds that you should do. I bet the conversion rate is extremely high on those.
Yeah.
I,
I mean, that's deception on like the ultimate level.
yeah.
Because I mean, it just reminds me of the Darren Brown Netflix stuff where he has the push, where he literally gets people to commit murder
Yeah.
just by orchestrating all of the different social pressures and influences around them. And
Mhm.
a lot of that's by getting real world people to just be pushy
Yeah.
and make you really feel like you need to do whatever they want you to do. And so if you start getting into that realm and it's already proven through the show you can get people to commit murder, then that can, if you have AI powered manipulation and it's combined with real world influence, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a terrible outcome.
Yeah. Especially if it's penetrating extremely deeply into the home. Like if it's just
Yeah, yeah,
it's always priming you with something within your own home. Like you said, your home should be a sanctuary. Now, if you
hmm,
willingly, watch cable TV and you have all these ads, fine. I mean, that's your decision. But if you don't have a choice,
yeah,
then that's an issue. I mean, even if you're poor, the choice can still be just don't do it. Like you can read a regular book instead of, you know, watching a documentary with ads or,
right. You should
there
always be
are
able to turn your
options.
TV or phone off and not have to worry about, oh, maybe it's actually on because of
Oh
some
yeah.
backdoor, which is already the case with devices. I mean, that's why people like Mark Zuckerberg have a little flap over their camera and audio mic input whenever they're not actively using those functions.
Yeah, that's scary that Mark Zuckerberg does. Like that should
Right.
be an indicator that it's a pretty important thing to do because he
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
knows, what the powers of these other corporations and the government actually are.
Hmm.
So that's one way that you can stay safe from, being spied on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that pretty much covers the worst case, best case, and most likely scenarios. Is there anything else that you feel like we left out that we should tell our listeners about?
No, I mean there were just a couple of really cool robots that were really interesting. So the Laundroid was one of them,
Hmm.
that folds your laundry, and these are things that are out right now.
Yeah.
And then if you have a home with a yard, then there are also these things called farm bots, which is this open source robot
Ah,
where you can basically have your own food growing
your
in
own
a
farm to
little
table.
patch.
That is something we
Yeah.
didn't touch on, where if you can also grow your own clean food, and maybe
Mm.
with, like in the future of food, you even have your own lab grown meat
Yeah.
growing as well, and you can be totally self sustaining. So whatever
Yeah.
else happens outside your home, in the home, it's self sustaining and
Yeah.
you can
And you could even
survive.
have, like, it depends on what the fundamental building blocks are to the meat, but it's not inconceivable in the far future that you could have your own, like, robot foragers. Like, let's say you lived out in the woods somewhere, but you had this high-tech home, and you knew what the raw materials were that are needed for certain lab-grown meats or anything else. You can have this bot just go out, pick whatever it needs to pick. Maybe it's just wood and some leaves and stuff, and somehow that can be converted into meat. with all these different chemical reactions. You know, there's a possibility that you don't have to ever go to the grocery store or
Right.
ever have even food delivered to you. You just go get it from your garden. This probably wouldn't work as well in a huge city just because there isn't that much space for you to have a garden. But what I do see as a possibility if you lived in a city, like in a huge building, is maybe the building has its own community garden. Like that's just one of the components to it. So whenever you need produce, you just go get it. Whenever you need meat, you just go get it. Because hopefully at some point, the cost to produce these things are so low that it's almost a negligible cost. Almost like water is sometimes included in our rent. We can have food included in our rent or our HOA fees if we own it.
Well, it could just be like how nowadays most apartments have a washer dryer unit. Most apartments in the future could have a automatic farming unit. And they say, oh, and the great thing, you know, you don't have to leave your house to get food. You don't have to leave your house to do your laundry. You never have to leave your house unless you want to mingle with other people or see the Eiffel Tower. Or, I mean, we definitely want to encourage people to commingle and explore the world. But if your house can be self-sustaining, that is clearly the best outcome.
Yeah, because one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is with the future of cities. I know I didn't talk about this in the future of cities, but if you had certain buildings that were basically like tribes. So if you wanted to live this way, you lived in this building. If you wanted to live this way, or if this was your personality, you live in this building. Kind of like in San Francisco, you have these really distinct neighborhoods of like of who lives where. You could have that, you know, this is in the future. We're talking, you know, 10 billion plus humans on planet Earth. Or, you know, this is also a possibility in the high density cities like Mumbai and some other Indian and Chinese cities with insanely high densities. We have these mega structures that are basically neighborhoods. And you can design.
So there would be a much greater sense of community, sort of like the WeLive model, where everyone has their own sort of bedroom, bathroom, but then you know, everything else is shared. So like living room is shared. You got the shared ping pong table, shared pool. Yeah. So other stuff that you might not even be able to afford on your own, anyways. But the fact that you can share it with people, and a lot of these units are all young people. All young professionals in New York, for instance. Yeah. And that can be great because what we've seen with, you know, technology thus far is that people tend to draw back within themselves if they don't have real interactions, and if all they see is Instagram and Facebook and where everything looks, you know, nice and perfect, then they can get more depressed. Whereas if you have people living in a college dorm room style environment, even older people, then I think people will just be happier overall.
Yeah, and then you do have that tribe, like that community that you can go to and you can connect. And I think that's one of the things we really need to think about going forward, is making sure that we don't completely get out of touch with humans and biological life. Because, you know, if you do go too far inward, then you're almost out of touch with your own like biology. Like it's totally against human nature to not have a community, even if it's a small tribe. Like myself, I'm more introverted than extroverted, and I just like to have a few close friends. And my scene isn't a huge party scene, but if you have, you know, these communities where you can make these close and deep relationships, then, you know, that I think that would be a really awesome way to live, you know, and have your home in these
also
sorts
like
of cities.
The other thing that's interesting, which is kind of getting a little into a different topic, but if, you know, when jobs are a thing of the past, when we tell our kids that, oh, I used to have a job, what will it be like as far as education? Because if you imagine growing up in one of these communities that we're talking about, and I imagine even though there aren't any jobs, we still will want our kids to be educated. We'll want them
Oh
to know
yeah.
how to read and write and paint and do all, all the things that we can do. But I guess like, how would you organize kids into different groups if there's no real company structure because there's no need for profit because AI and automation is doing everything? It almost would be like organizing them into guilds. And it's like, oh, you're someone who loves doing creative things, or you're someone who's loves building things and being an engineer, or you're someone who loves experimenting and learning about new ideas. Then you could sort of like still faction people off, but maybe it doesn't have to end, once it's like, okay, now you know enough stuff, which is what happens now. It could be a lifelong learning and a lifelong building, and there could sort of be like almost like a college system for your whole life with different colleges and dorms and clubs and
Yeah. And so I love talking about this kind of stuff too. I'm glad you brought it up because I don't think that, so if we just did UBI and people just did whatever they want, I don't think that's the end, because then, I guess you could still say that AI is going to advance and do whatever it's going to do, but I still want to be involved in that in advancement.
I mean, there will still be like major trends among human society even after we are out of the workforce. Like, oh, since the AI revolution, this is the most popular type of art among humans. This is the most popular type of literature that people are talking about. Like, harkening back to the 80s, but with future that we know now, like there still is going to be all of the cultural stuff, and it's probably going to be even amplified far greater. But we're just not going to have to do the boring logistical stuff. Like no one's going to be working at Amazon packaging shipping centers.
Yeah. And we'll have these people that can do whatever they want, but they can do what they're good at and love, but they're augmented. Like, let's say there is some sort of neural link where learning is almost instantaneous. Like right now, learning is such a bottleneck when it comes to innovation that I think once we have some sort of neural link that can almost upload knowledge, it just becomes fundamental to who we are. So if you think about how knowledge is transferred or has been transferred historically, like we keep getting better because our knowledge right now, just everything that we learned in elementary school has at one point in human history been completely inconceivable. Like the fact that the earth is
every
round.
generation learns everything that the previous generation knew and then some. So, just given how much we know it now, it's just growing exponentially. I mean, every year, I read this stat that every year more scientific literature is being created than all the previous years combined, just because of the scale of how much new stuff happens every instant on the internet.
Yeah, it's nuts. And if we can learn that, right now the bottleneck is getting it into our brains. Like our brains only have so much capacity. But if we can really learn what it takes to be or to think like an Elon Musk. Like what if we had a million Elon Musks, similar to that question that Joe Rogan posed on his podcast with him. Like what does the world look like? But if we have a neural link type system where you can just instantly get all of this information and become a master engineer or a master mathematician, and you can augment yourself and your own biological thinking with artificial
We would need lots of safeguards so that rogue engineers don't just start building like bridges all over each other.
Yeah, but, I mean, there will probably be some sort of AI governance. I mean, if it has...
Well, I think the big filter is going to be, like it is today, finances. So you can start building the most incredible things, but if you don't have the finances, you're not going to be able to construct anything. And if you do have the finances, you can still get fined for doing things that are against code and that kind of stuff. But
because I just wonder what it takes to get to these different civilization levels. So have you heard of like the Kardashev scale?
Is that like where you have all the planet or all the power of the Earth and then of the sun and then of the whole
the solar... it's so right now we're like not even a type 1 civilization. Type 1 is we can harness all the power of our sun. Type 2 is we can harvest all the power of like some small subset of the galaxy, and then type 3 is you can harness all the energy of your galaxy.
Right.
So it's like this exponential scale, but I just wonder what it looks like when we're a type 1 even. Like we can just harness all of the energy of the sun, and what kind of lives people live when, you know, we're harnessing, we have this like Dyson sphere around our sun,
Right.
where we're harnessing all the power.
Well, I think it depends what our ambitions are. I mean,
Yeah.
right now it seems like a lot of people are satisfied just being in the world of Netflix and their couch and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So, but if people have, I mean, there are also people who exist today who have ambitions to colonize Mars. And for those people, it doesn't take that many of them to make a big dent in the universe. I think it's pretty exciting for humankind as a whole. And I think even for the average person, that the future of the home is going to be very compelling. And it's going to pose some interesting challenges, but it'll also make our lives a lot more convenient. All right, well, I think that's a good place to end it. So thank you everyone for listening. This has been the future of smart homes. And join us next time for the future of gene editing.
What is currently happening,
See you there.
and what will inevitably happen.
The past, the present, and the